according to St. Luke, the 16th chapter. Jesus also said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you no longer can be steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I cannot dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I resolve what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his master's debtors to him and said to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. So the steward said, take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to the other, and how much do you owe? So he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill, write 80. So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. And I say to yourself, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to you your trust, the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in another man's, who will give you what is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either hate the one, love the other, or else will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. The Gospel of the Lord. About this time of year, 2 Septembers ago, Pastor McGuire and I got fired. It was very odd because we were both let go from jobs for which the amount we were paid was a pittance. And when you consider the amount of time we were expected to put in and the amount of inconvenience our second jobs placed on this parish, the amount was penurious. Being fired was also sadly humorous and somewhat fortuitous, especially for you, because out of the goodness of your heart, you were underwriting both of our positions. You gave us salaries we could live on and paid our pensions and benefits, something the other church could not have done while they asked for more and more of our time and energy. In that sense, the firing was a blessing for this congregation, and I speak only for myself, but I would say probably both of your pastors. It also helped me to understand today's gospel better than most preachers who did not have that experience. Almost everybody I have read this week do not understand Jesus' parable. They are puzzled by the crooked manager and even more confused when his boss praises him for being a charlatan. I know why this story works, and here's how. See, when I got fired, taking Pastor McGuire down with me as collateral damage, I had discovered some financial shenanigans and was on the verge of exposing those misdeeds. I do need to admit, it was kind of fun. It was like being Hercule Poirot, finding the clues and then putting them together in a kind of a sad and sordid jigsaw puzzle. There was also the excitement of working under the pressure of knowing that if anybody found out what I was doing, I was sure to be fired. 2 weeks more, and I would have had all the evidence I needed. Perhaps even a couple of days would have done the job, because the night my termination letter was personally delivered to my front door, technically barring me from any access to the building and certainly any access to their computers, I was on the verge of discovering just how deep the financial misdeeds had gone and bringing them into the light of day. But someone caught on and did what they needed to do to stop any further investigation on my part. They fired me. And when you think about it, that's the rational thing to do. It's the ecclesiastical equivalent of the mob hit. Stop the investigation at any cost. Get rid of the dirty rat who's going to rat you out. And if you can't use a gun, use a pink slip. But the guy in today's gospel doesn't do any of that. When he gets caught red-handed, staring at a set of gin books that could never be reconciled in a million years, he doesn't fire anybody. He doesn't even, and listen to me carefully now, because this is the part of the story that all good theologians and scholars that I read missed this week. Listen. He doesn't even go to those who owed his master money and try to shake them down, extort the money out of them even, demand payment. Instead, when the investigation is closed and all the fingers point to him as a culprit, he does something that is shrewd. Really shrewd. The manager first assesses his skill level and realizes that he has none. He says, in one of my favorite lines in all of Scripture, I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. Know your skill set, I always say. And apparently the only thing this guy has ever been good at is the art of the swindle. So off he goes to salvage what little of his life he has left. He calls in some of the master's biggest debtors and says, in today's language, how much do you owe my master? 1,000? Let's see. With a couple of backspaces here and there, and oh my gosh, it only says here that you owe 100. Give me that in cash now, and we'll call it a day. Wink, wink. To another he says, on your bill here, it says you owe 4 million. But there must be some sort of glitch in the computer system, because my spreadsheet only says that you owe $400. Could you make that payment right now? In cash, please? No. Huge sums are written off. So when the master sacks the little crook, he can go to these debtors and say, hey, remember me? I'm the guy who helped you jilt my former boss. He's making his boss's debtors his debtors, and they owe him big time, or at least enough to furnish room and board until he gets back on his feet and lands a job where his reputation does not precede him. And we, the children of light, Jesus calls us, are knocked off our feet when the master calls him in for the big day of reckoning. We're expecting yelling, screaming, the police bursting in with guns drawn and handcuffs at the ready. We're expecting one of those famous perp walks in shackles. But instead, we hear the master praise the little creep. Why? Because he knew how to look after himself. Streetwise people are smarter in this regard than law-abiding citizens. They are on constant alert, looking for angles, surviving by their wits. Jesus says, I want you to be smart in the same way, but for what is right. That's the point of the parable. It came to me as I thought back on my little adventure of being a pastor who got turned into a detective that led to my firing. If the manager had spent as much time keeping legitimate accounts as he did trying to save his skin when his bad bookkeeping was exposed, he might have been a wealthy landowner himself. And if the people responsible had spent half as much time and effort in raising money in a legitimate fashion rather than keeping 3 or 4 sets of books where they literally robbed Peter to pay Peter, they would have been rolling in dough. If they'd have learned how to write grant applications rather than juggle numbers, they would have been able to buy every church that was for sale on the northwest side. But the harm of their cheating caused their witness to be diminished. Oh, sure. They are still claiming that they are teaching children. But nobody ever brought a child to Christ while teaching them to cheat. The people I almost caught, and most scholars miss the point of the story because they cannot get over their surprise at the master's reaction. It's like they are so stupefied that they forget to read further where Jesus says, if you're honest in small things, you'll be honest in big things. If you're a crook in small things, you'll be a crook in big things. If you're not honest in small jobs, who will put you in charge of the store? No worker can serve 2 bosses. He'll either hate the first and love the second, or adore the first and despise the second. You cannot serve both God and the bank. Nope. It is God who Jesus is calling us to serve first. Even if we are as cunning and charming as the crooked manager. Or tell ourselves, don't you know, that cooking the books is okay. because it's done to benefit the children of the school. That's why I think the simple message of this very complicated parable is God still knows. And God still calls us to put as much effort into serving Him as we do in anything else. If that is indeed what Jesus is telling us, all I can say is shrewd. Very shrewd. Thanks for listening.